So I'd love to
Seven.
talk some Hydra Vein, um, learn more about the band and stuff. And also just like your journey as a musician, because you've been playing bass for like a pretty long time
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
What was your introduction to the bass?
I mean, it goes way back to when I was about 6 years old and started with cello, actually.
Wow.
Um, then as you get older, you get into your teenage years, cello's not particularly rock and roll. So then you pick up a guitar. Um, but then you find actually everybody wants to be a guitarist, and there's more work being a bass player if you want to actually do stuff. So it was about, I would guess, what 15 or 16, switched to bass, primarily to play in the band Death Wish at that time. And then pretty much just stuck with the bass since. So it's yeah, it's a long time. Some for 40 years or something along those lines. Yeah.
Wow. Do you remember what like some of your earliest influences are, like metal wise?
Uh, well, but as bass players or
Yeah,
bands,
sure.
Geezer Butler very much a big one. Um, from a very young age, I think Geezer Butler and most of actually the influences I had kind of predate the thrash thing. So that would be people like Pete Way. It would be people like Phil Lynott. A little bit earlier than the early '80s thrash thing.
Yeah. Um, Now was there I know Hydra Vein formed in 87, right? Uh
Yep.
was there really like a UK thrash scene in the area?
Um, well, yeah. I mean, where we were, which was on the south coast, Brighton. So there at the same time, there were us, there was Death Wish, there was Virus, there were a handful of other thrash bands. I mean, we're not talking about anybody who went on to world domination or what have you, but there was absolutely a handful of bands who were playing that kind of stuff, slightly different takes on it, slightly different versions on it. Um, whether I'd say it was anything so well defined as a scene, I don't know. We used to get people turning up to see us play, and we were playing, and so I guess that's the scene, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it was. We wouldn't have been getting multiple hundreds of fans, I think, to gigs back then, but it was a scene for what it was.
Yeah, was the band close with any of those other bands? Like was there really a relationship?
Yeah. We were kind of friends with virtually everybody on the scene. With Death Wish, both me and my brother, who was the drummer behind Hydra Vein, we both played with them for a short while before Hydra Vein. Virus, we would hang around in bars with, have the odd beer with. Other bands, not so much necessarily thrash, but grindcore bands like Necrosanct, again, big buddies of ours. So there was never really any antagonism between the various bands there. We were just one group, all doing again, all doing our slightly different take on the thing. If you listen to any of us, we were not playing exactly the same kind of thing, right? It was thrash metal in broad terms, but very um, personal takes on thrash metal for each of those bands.
Interesting. I know here in America when the Bay Area discovered the new wave of British heavy metal bands, Diamond Head, many others, Jaguar. It was a major influence. Did the new wave of British heavy metal scene, like, or just movement, really affect your playing?
Mine, yes. Absolutely. If we're looking at bands like Diamond Head, if we're looking at bands like Holocaust, Angel Witch, early Iron Maiden, That was really the period of music. I'd have been what, around 13 or so, around that time, and that's the age when you really get bitten by the bug if you're going to get bitten by it.
Yeah.
So certainly all of those independent singles coming out from, oh God, so many bands. Um, it was a major thing for me. I don't know if that's exactly the same for the other thrash bands in the Brighton scene. I have to say, a couple of them came out of what was more a punk kind of world. Um, to a large degree, but certainly for what I was doing and for our band, it was core to everything. In fact, really, the whole thrash metal thing to me always just seemed like an extension of the new wave of British heavy metal thing. Really, I mean, hardly. There's hardly a difference between the approach on the first Diamond Head album and the first Metallica album. It's a very similar kind of thing, really.
Yeah. Now, Hydra Vein's been around for a long time. How do you recall the formation of the band?
It was really not a lot of romance about it. I'd kind of walked away from Death Wish for a couple of reasons, and we'd really just advertised for a guitarist. My brother's a drummer, so he was already on board. Mike, the singer, was a long-term friend of ours. He was already on board, so we were really looking for guitarists, and we put ad in the rock magazine Kerrang! And also Metal Forces, I think, at the time for guitarist. We had two guys who got in touch who seemed quite serious about it. We caught up with them at, I think it was an Anthrax show actually at the Hammersmith Odeon. Um, may have been somebody else, but I got a feeling it was Anthrax. And got on with both of them and decided that we'd try it with the two guitars and see how that worked, and it did. In the meantime, we'd been approached by Metal Other Records, who'd heard the demo and were keen on working with us. So we pretty much immediately had an album to work towards with that lineup. So finalized the band. I think it would have been November '87. And then went into the studio to record the first album in February '88. So it was
Wow.
really a case of get get some intensive work under the belt, 2 or 3 months, and then just go in and do it. So yeah.
Yeah. Uh, what does Hydra Vein mean?
Well, to be honest, I stole the name. There was you were asking about the new wave of British heavy metal, and there was a new wave of British heavy metal band called Hydra Vein prior to us, but they didn't really enjoy a very high profile, and I thought the name was quite cool. In where you pass anybody carrying out roadworks, anybody with a pneumatic drill, the portable compressors that people use, at least over here, is called a Hydro Vein. It's kind of a brand name for those compressors, and Hydra Vein is a misspelling of that effectively to yeah. So it's got no particular meaning behind it. It just yeah, you can
Sounds
call
cool.
yourself anything. Yeah, if it works, right? And there's no laws, there's no rules, so you can call yourself whatever the hell you want. And we kind of knew, apart from the one band whose name I'd stolen it from, we kind of knew that nobody else was going to come out called that. So no worries.
Yeah, didn't they only have like a demo or something?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've periodically felt guilty about doing it actually. But if it had bothered them and they'd have heard of us, then they'd have been in touch by now, and they haven't been. So I presume it's all good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very, very funny to hear. Rather Death and False Faith came out in '88. What was the writing and recording process of this record?
Well, I had the 8 tracks already written. When we got the two guitarists on board, Dan and Steve, we we had the numbers ready to go. We'd already had three out on the demo tape, the Reptilia demo tape before that. So it was really, really just a case of getting the guys in and getting them learning these songs and getting it polished enough to be able to go in and record them. For when it came to the songs from the second album, that was more a collaborative writing effort. But for this one, they were there. We had them. It was a case of go in and learn it, really.
Wow. So you were signed for it was Metal Other Records, I believe, for
Yes,
that
yes.
release. How'd you get signed to that label?
Um, we bumped into another gig at the Hammersmith Odeon. I'm trying to remember who it was. We did quite a lot of our networking there at that time. I'm trying to think who the hell it was. I've got a feeling it might have
Long,
involved
long time ago.
Metal Church or somebody. But effectively, I got talking to Steve Beatty at the bar, and he was the main guy with Metal Other. It's now Plastic Head Promotion. They're still going. It's who we're signed
Interesting.
to now, actually.
Wow.
And he said he liked the demo and was interested in spending the money on putting us in the studio for an album. So it was yeah, as simple as simple as that, really.
Yeah. Did you get a good budget for that record?
No.
Did you draw the
uh,
album art?
no, we didn't do that either. The budget was well, it's what Metal Other could afford at the time. I've got a feeling, a dim memory. I think it was like £800 the budget.
Wow.
Which back in those days I think covered us for about 8 days, pretty much. So that's what we took to do it. The album
Took
art,
eight
we
days to record.
record and mix it, yeah.
Wow.
Um, the album art, we had a manager at the time, or a wannabe manager at the time, who knew an artist, right? Um, and for weeks we had no idea what was happening with the sleeve, right? Other than there was a sleeve being painted. And then by the time we actually saw it, it was a little bit too late to do very much about it. It had to go to the record label, and so off we went. And in all of the years since, I've kind of yeah got some reasonably warm feelings now to that sleep. It's so it's so bad you can only really laugh about it, and hey ho.
It's 80s.
It's very very much 80s. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah. Now the album was delayed due to the title, right?
Apparently so. Yeah.
Yeah, what was your reaction to that?
Well, we found it hard to credit, to be honest, right? The title, I think it's a quote from Blake. Actually, it's a poetic quote. In
Oh,
in in, in any case, at school, when I was at school, they had it written above the entrance to the school, kind of like a motto. So there was no political influence behind the use of it. So when a couple of the major record stores decided that it seemed too political in light of an IRA attack, which had happened around the same time, we were just basically very surprised about that. Ultimately, the delay pushed it back to November '88, I think, is when it eventually came out. So it didn't end up being a huge delay, but certainly about 5 or 6 months, which didn't really do us much good.
yeah. I feel like it must have hurt the release being delayed
Yeah,
like 6 months or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I mean, certainly then, and certainly with the UK thrash scene, we were always trying to play catch up with the rest of the world, right? The Americans were ahead of us, the Germans were ahead of us, so we were trying to play catch up in the UK in total. So then every month that you're later on the scene is going to hurt to some degree. Um, Looking back, I don't know if it would have made an enormous difference, but it certainly felt it at the time to us that we were losing time, that we were losing ground. Every week it was going to be later.
So I assume that's why you jumped into the sophomore record so fast.
Yeah, partly that. But it kind of seems like we did that rather than we actually did. We once we were done in February with the recording, and then we were able to get out, and we were able to play some shows with a band at that time. However, we were a little bit careless with our guitarists, and we ended up losing both of them between that album and the next one. So again, we'd worked hard with that band. We had the material for the second album, but now suddenly we've got to get another two guitarists in. We've got to get them learning the old stuff and the new stuff, and get ourselves together. So yeah, the fact that it all kind of happened within I don't know, 16 months or whatever it was. Um, Seems like it was accelerated, but at the time to us, it really didn't quite. It just seemed a natural thing to be doing. We're not going to be touring if we're still auditioning guitarists, right? So
Yeah.
we were there in the studio. We were there working on it. It was the thing to do.
So you switched labels to RKT
Yeah.
for that one, and then ended up with the third, like going back to Metal Other technically.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so why was there a change of labels with the second release?
Um, I'm 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 not really entirely sure now why. We were in a certain degree of flux. I don't know if at the time I really don't remember very clearly, but I don't know if at the time Med Lover even had the wherewithal to put us in the studio again that soon. And RKT had got in touch, showing interest in releasing a second album for us if we had the material for it, and we did. And as there was no counter offer from Metal Other on the table at the time, we ran with RKT for that album. All of the years later, Steve from Metal Other, or Back in Black as they are now, got in touch. Um, Really regarding re-releasing the first two albums. Um, we got into a discussion on that one, and while we were talking about it, I did mention we had new material. We had new material on the back of our what was meant to be our curtain down kind of farewell gig in Newcastle in 2020. Um, and he offered to put up the money for the new album as well. So yeah, we're all back together again, as if nothing had happened in the meantime. Kind of weird.
It's yeah. Well, it's really awesome, and I'll definitely get into it in a sec. But that third record it's like you guys never took a break. Very, very good.
Thank you.
And it is kind of a step up in like almost every way. Like production is way better.
Yeah. It costs
The
more than eight
writing,
hundred
never
pounds.
took a break. Yeah. For the second release, was it how much was it, like the same budget about?
It
It's a
was
little more, right?
no, very similar, and a very similar amount of time as well. In fact, the main reason why that second one is kind of short is like let's call it a Van Halen length album. Is really we were trying to get as high a quality recording out of a handful of days as possible. So one of the songs which would have been on that one only actually saw the light of day on the recent one.
Wow.
It opens the recent album. But back at the time, we were looking to just try and make sure that it had a higher quality of recording on it than the first one, really. Again, things were moving very, very quickly, and we're up against a lot of bands with bigger budgets, and you've got to actually try and keep up with the Joneses, right, to some degree.
Yeah. How much do you recall how much time you had in the studio with
That that
RKT?
that second one again, I think that was again 8 days.
Wow.
I think that was the it was kind of how long we got back then.
Very different day and age now. Wow.
Yeah, and no, we did the new one. I'm trying to think actually how uh to for the actual recording. I think um it wasn't very much longer than that. I think it was yeah, probably about 7 8 days and another 3 days to mix it. So
Wow.
it wasn't a huge amount of time. Then again, it's how we work. Really, we go in and put most of the stuff down live, and if you know what you're doing, and if you're rehearsed enough, then you don't need a massive amount of time to actually go in and do that. We're not seeing the drummer change his drum heads between every take. A la Lars Ulrich and maybe not Lars Ulrich, but that's the name that springs to mind. But yeah, we're working in the underground, right? So there's not ever going to be a budget to take months and months over this stuff. So we make sure that we're kind of rehearsed. We can get in, we can put it down, and on we go. Really.
Yeah. So, you guys were like really very, very active for 3 years until you went on hiatus.
Mm.
Um, what do you feel was one of the biggest reasons why you guys went on that hiatus for like 20 years?
Um. Well,
30, I
the
should say.
Well, yeah, 30 years. A mix of things, but really the what the audience were demanding changed, right? People do talk about the arrival of the grunge scene and the way that fans migrated over to that, but it wasn't just that. There was in the extreme music, there was a move towards death metal, black metal. There was a whole fracturing of the scene that we were working in, and people really weren't that interested in gonna see or listen to thrash metal bands anymore. So it certainly became immediately more difficult in the UK. I moved from there over to Holland to to see if anything was any better over here on the continent. And for a year or so, maybe it was, but that was then working with a different band by then. But ultimately, yeah, nobody was really interested in what we were doing. So then you move on. You do other things. You work on other stuff, and it's only really in more recent years that there's been a reawakening of interest in that whole 80s thrash thing. Um, and even then, we weren't immediately keen on getting back together and doing anything. Our singer had died at the turn of the century, um, so it was never gonna quite be the same anyway without him. However, eventually we were talked into it. We did the show in Newcastle. We had an awful lot of fun doing
It's
it.
like
It was
Brofest, I believe.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. and from there, really, just the idea to put some more songs together came about, and before you know it, you end up with an album's worth, right?
Yeah.
It's there's none of this stuff is particularly planned. It just takes off and starts rolling, and you roll with it. Why not?
Yeah. What was it like returning to the stage after like 30 years of not playing
It
thrash?
it was well 30 years not playing with this band. I mean,
Well, it's Hydra Vein,
yeah,
yeah.
right, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, we'd all kind of kept our arms in with various other things, but it was actually wonderful. It was kind of like getting back into a warm bath. Um, but when we agreed to do it, I mean, I'm over here in Holland. The rest of the guys are spread over the UK, so it was never going to be very easy to even get together to rehearse, right, for the show. So we had only two rehearsals before we actually did Brofest. But the first of those, as soon as you get in the studio and you've got a whole day with everybody again, it was as if we'd never been away. It was just a really lovely, comfortable, fun feeling. So that one, and then the second rehearsal, and then back on stage. We did think we had in our minds this was just a way that we were going to bring the curtain down on the band, right? We had everybody who was still around on the stage. It was just going to be a case of, right, we bring this down now. It's nice and it's cool. Then we end up in the middle of a pandemic, and while you're hanging around the house doing nothing, and then your mind starts wandering, and you have time maybe to write songs, and before you know it, you're somewhere else. But it was a great thing. Even if we'd have just stopped completely, if we'd have finished straight after the Brofest show, it would have been absolutely worthwhile doing that. It was a wonderful thing.
What was that recruiting process like for the new lineup?
Um, we've never really had a load of trouble getting musicians together. So initially, what we were going to do is we were going to put the album together with all the guys from previous iterations of the band. That was the idea. However, the more people had time to think about it, once the initial enthusiasm wore off, um, the more people realized that this was going to be a hell of a lot of work actually doing it from two different countries and what have you. Um, so other than Dan, the guitarist, and James, the singer, everybody else kind of drifted away. So it seemed to me just logical to at least have a drummer and a guitarist here to work with as a core for the band. Now Henry, one of the guitarists we ended up with, I did used to play with in a band way back when I first moved over here, way back in the early '90s, a thrash band. So I've known him for a long time.
What band was that?
Um, there was a band called Power Pact at the time. Um, so he was on board pretty much straight away. And John the drummer and Jonesy the other guitarist, they both responded actually to I think a Facebook request. I just put a request out on the Hydra Vein page on Facebook, and the guys came back.
Wow.
So we got in the studio and it seemed to work, and we get on really well. So there you go. Before you know it, you've got this band together. So with that core over here, we were able to work up the bulk of all the songs, and then brought James and Dan over when we were actually in the recording sessions to do their to do their thing. These days also you can do quite a lot swapping sound files with each other through the internet, right, and putting them on your DAW platforms at home. So to take a guitar piece that Dan's done in Eastbourne and put it on the version of the song I got here is a really straightforward, easy thing. So technology helps. The distance isn't as big a barrier as it would have been 30 years ago, for sure. But again, for the core stuff, to have actually a handful of us where we're going in every week and working for 6 hours to actually arrange songs and work on songs and finesse songs, that does make a huge difference. That is important. So the Dutch-based guys are valuable, extremely valuable.
Definitely, and really cool to hear. And that must have been so nice, not having like the 8 days limit or something or anything. I feel like so it was Metal Other, right? What it was that same.
It was Metal Other. So it's really the whole company is called Plastic Head. They back when they were running Metal Other, Plastic Head was pretty much the distribution arm of the business. Now they're running the label. I think is Back in Black or Back on Black. Um, and that's effectively the label we're on, but it is still Metal Other, it is still Plastic Head, it is still Steve Beatty running it. So yeah, as I said, it's 34 years on, and we're back working with the same guys. At least for that album. I don't know. Maybe RKT will phone me up for the next one. We don't know, right?
Hopefully. Um Now it was so long since the gap between the second and third release. How much do you think your just like writing process and overall creative function has evolved since like 89?
Um, that's that's a good question. Um, when we talked about writing new material, it was pretty much a rule that I set for myself, that we'd only do it, we'd only do new songs if it came naturally, if we weren't actually going in and trying to recreate what we'd done artificially from back in the day. It had to be real. Um, and it took a little while actually. You Because we've been working for all of the years since, not necessarily in thrash metal, but different kinds of metal, different kinds of hard rock, really. It does take a little while to get back into that mindset. However, after a few weeks, a couple of months of actually just working on it, seeing how it came, it did start to come. The songs came largely naturally. The structures aren't a million miles away from what we'd previously done. With Does the End Justify the Means, which opens the album properly. As I say, that one was really left off the sessions from After the Dream back in '89. So um, being able to pick that up from the rehearsal tapes that we had back then and just run the song through, that kind of recentered us, put us in the zone again. And then after that, it's a case of, okay, then see how they come, see how these songs work, and ultimately we ended up with I think 12 or 13 numbers, from which we did 8 plus the instrumental intro. We now have way more than a second album stuff written as well. It's really a case of once you actually get up to speed, then the music starts coming, and naturally, and it's still largely me writing these riffs, so it's not going to be completely different to the stuff I've done before, right? It's still coming from in here. Um, so yeah, it's all been quite easy. It's all been quite straightforward.
You teased the future of Hydra Vein, but I'm just curious, what does the future hold for the band?
We'll see. We'll roll with it. We do, as I say, we do have an album's worth of material written. Back in Black have an option on another album if they want to take it up. They've got, I mean, from about now they've got about 6 months time to decide if they want to do that or not. If they do, great, then we'll be doing another album. If they decide not to, then we'll have to see if anybody else is willing to sign the check to, to let us do another album.
Well, let's hope so, man.
Well, yeah, we can hope so, but you know, ultimately, we never expected all these years on, 34 years or whatever it's been, after that second album to be back here talking to guys like you and promoting a third one. So it's already been crazy. It's already been a blast. It's already been great. So there'd be absolutely no regrets if this is as far as we get. But we do collectively like the material that we have ready to go, and it would be beyond nice to be able to release album 4, um, which I'd say, although I'm going to say that, I'd say would probably be about the strongest of everything that we've done.
Wow. Wow.
But we'll see what happens. It may be there, it may not.
Very exciting, especially with this resurgence thrash metal's gotten. And I think streaming has like a big role in that, you know, because like that's how I even discovered you guys, through the internet. You know, it's way different now. What's your reaction to this whole resurgence the genre's gotten?
It's just kind of crazy, as I said, that people go back and discover the big four. That's not such a surprise, right? That, you know, people have always done that. In the 80s, people were going back and listening to Zeppelin and whatever. That's going to happen. But that there's been so much interest in, if you like, the lesser known names, is surprising and a little bit humbling and pretty cool. And you're right, streaming does make it easier. But back when I was a kid, you had to either buy the records or maybe you were trading tapes, right? But there was certainly no ability to just go on into the ether and pluck out every song there's ever been, for
Yeah,
nothing and listen your way through it.
it's crazy.
So yeah, it's a cool thing. It comes with some downsides for musicians, especially, right? But if the whole point is to get your songs out there to get your music heard, then it's great for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it sure is. And yeah, unfortunately, there is that there's no money in it at all.
No, no. I mean, there was never very much money in it for us anyway. But, so you know, it's like little money or no money. Yeah, there's not a lot of difference there. But certainly for a lot of artists, especially younger ones who are trying to take off, it can mean the difference. It can mean the difference between a band being able to hold on there for 5 or 6 years until they actually start becoming what they're meant to become, or calling it a day much earlier than that. And I think ultimately it means that we probably miss out on a lot of good music because bands aren't hanging around long enough. Um, but yeah, as I say, it's swings and roundabouts to some degree.
That's why you gotta buy the physical media, buy the merch, support the band. Uh, as we wrap up here, what's the best way for people to stay in touch with Hydra Vein?
Um, Well, really, I know it's kind of old hat, the Facebook thing, but we are on there. We will announce whatever's happening on there. There is a video coming out soon, for Blue Lamp off the last album. So that will be available to see on YouTube. I would very much hope by, let's say, mid-November at the very latest. Um, Find us there and there'll be updates. Find us on Spotify, and if we're playing gigs, then there'll be updates on that as well.
Instagram as well, you guys.
Yeah, I think Dan keeps an Instagram profile. It's all a bit young for me, Instagram. but
well,
but, uh, but
well, hey,
we are there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well,
Really
thank you for
appreciate it.
taking the time, man.
I'm Brandon Baddock, and this is Disturbing the Priest.